Ryan confessed he still loved me after his breakup, but days later, he lied about wanting Tish back. OMG, was I just a placeholder? This is going to be quite lengthy. First, I want to clarify that I recognize that one is not entitled to a relationship with another person simply because there are shared romantic feelings. However, that was not the real essence of my situation. I find myself bewildered by the circumstances surrounding it. It seems as if I have been manipulated in some way. Perhaps an outside viewpoint could provide clarity on what transpired. I had an ex-friend who would sporadically disappear from my life over the years. We will refer to him as Ryan. For context, we were in a relationship approximately 8 to 9 years ago, which ended when I had to relocate to another state. Afterward, he would reach out intermittently, but it would only be a short time before he vanished again. Many of his abrupt departures were due to being involved in an on-again, off-again relationship with someone I will call Tish. Naturally, I did not concern myself too much with it, as I preferred to stay out of relationship drama. However, he would often vent to me whenever she would betray him by lying or cheating in their relationship. I took on the roles of observer and listener, only offering my opinions when he insisted that I weigh in on matters. This dynamic persisted for several years, with him disappearing whenever he and Tish were doing well and returning to express his frustration or solicit advice when he discovered new information. This pattern provided me with a distinct viewpoint on Tish, and honestly, I found myself disliking her quite a bit. I also felt a sense of protection towards Ryan because of the care I have always had for him. In hindsight, I probably should have stayed out of his affairs. One day, he called me in tears after returning home to find that Tish had left without any communication. When I say left, I mean that all of her belongings and essentials were gone from the house. He was heartbroken and I couldn't blame him. Eventually, he learned that she had departed to find herself and had moved in with a friend to gain some space and assess what they wanted from their relationship. During this time, Ryan confided in me about his heartbreak and feelings surrounding the situation. Over the next month or two, I witnessed him experience fluctuating feelings of despair and numbness. Yet, I also saw him engaging in deep self-reflection, examining what was wrong on his part as well as on hers. I was proud of him for taking accountability while recognizing that neither party was providing what was necessary for a healthy relationship. Then one night, during a break from work, he asked if we could talk. He seemed somewhat off and anxious, which made me concerned. He expressed that in the months we had been communicating, he had come to realize that he still loved me and regretted letting me go all those years ago. This revelation caught me completely by surprise, especially considering his recent circumstances. He inquired if I felt similarly, and I foolishly replied in the affirmative. While it was true, we both understood that pursuing a relationship was not feasible for either of us at that moment. We had both recently emerged from emotionally taxing situations and needed time to heal. We agreed to remain supportive of one another, despite these circumstances. As a result, our communication intensified significantly. We would talk at every available moment, even falling asleep on the phone together often. We casually exchanged, "I love you," as if it were part of everyday conversation. Again, we had acknowledged our romantic feelings, yet we were not intending to enter into a relationship, as he had just exited a toxic one, and I was still dealing with my newfound single status. I also shared that I wished to visit his city to see the area for the first time and spend time with him. He was enthusiastic, saying he would take time off work during my visit. While we were planning, I continued to support him in processing his breakup and uncovering Tish's lies. It turned out she had been attempting to maintain secret communication with Ryan while living with another man. Apparently, this was not the first time she had engaged in such behavior. It was merely the first successful attempt. As the days drew closer to my visit, I could sense his excitement as he talked about what he hoped to do with me and introducing me to his friends. Naturally, I was exhilarated too. We arranged for me to stay at his house and share a room, which I was comfortable with as it saved both money and time. Throughout the planning, he would often say sweet things like, "I really enjoy having you here. You've made me happier than I have been in years." I will admit that these comments made me feel warm and appreciated. When the day finally arrived for me to fly out, our anticipation to see each other was palpable. He mentioned feeling nervous because it had been such a long time, and I confessed I felt anxious as well. However, when we were finally together, I had never seen someone so joyful, and his embrace was incredibly welcoming. He later inquired if it would be acceptable to discuss the possibility of physical intimacy, and I made it clear that if anything were to happen, it would be consensual, so there would be no awkwardness. It did not take long for him to fully take advantage of that consent. To be transparent, I did not mind. I cherished every moment, including the affection and deeper conversations. He treated me to outings with his friends, who were wonderful, and I could understand why he regarded them highly, and even began discussing plans for us to reunite in March. Those 3 days were fantastic, despite a few hiccups with renting a car. The last night together felt typical, with intimacy and cuddles, when suddenly he whispered, "I wish we could be together," which surprised me, but I responded softly with, "Awa, Ryan." He mentioned something else, but I won't go into detail because it relates to our past. We slept well through the night and into the morning. The following evening, I was taken to the airport and endured the long journey back home. From that point onward, things became exceptionally strange. In the ensuing days, he asked about my feelings for him, questioning if they were genuinely romantic or merely platonic. I was puzzled as to why this was significant since we had already clarified our situation. To humor him, I expressed my romantic love for him and articulated how deeply we connected. He reiterated that he shared the same sentiment, but expressed concern about the viability of a relationship for him. Utterly bewildered, I acknowledged that I understood. He further explained that, although we had spent extensive time together before, our relationship years prior had felt rushed, and he regretted not taking the time to truly understand me. It was then that he began posing the customary, "getting to know you" questions, such as my favorite food and color. He suggested that we should engage in these conversations more often to deepen our familiarity with one another, to which I agreed. Meanwhile, he continued to vent to me about Tish, expressing discomfort about the feelings we shared, but I always understood his position. Then, one day, things turned strange yet again. He noticed tears streaming down my face while I was reading something and suddenly expressed, "I hope I'm not the reason for your tears." Once more perplexed, I asked what made him think I would be upset over him. He admitted to having spoken with his mother, who very much cherishes me, and mentioned that she warned him not to hurt me. This left me even more confused, considering I had shared with him the distress caused by my previous partner who had been relentlessly pursuing me after our breakup. I clarified that my tears had nothing to do with him. I was upset about the actions of that former partner. I emphasized that I had no reason to cry over him, as we had both reinforced that we were not prepared for a relationship, and I was certainly not attempting to impose one on him. Ryan grew quiet after that, shifting to play video games during our call, while I eventually drifted into sleep. The next day, we did not communicate mostly because I found the sudden shift in the mood to be jarring and needed time to reflect on how to approach the matter. I intended to tell him that if he felt we needed some distance, I would be fine with that, especially given our awkward conversation the night before. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to voice my thoughts because the next morning, he sent me a lengthy message. He had lied. He had spoken with Tish about rekindling their relationship and her moving back in with him. He told her that when I visited, nothing occurred and I was nothing to worry about. He still loved her and wanted to be with her. He claimed he needed to send that message to reassure Tish that he was truthful with me so I could see it. To say I was astonished would be an understatement. I was enraged. I was devastated. I hurled every insult imaginable at him while crying and shouting. I informed him that if he wished to be with her, he should have never allowed me to board that plane and questioned what he was thinking when we had been intimate. All he could say was, "I didn't mean to. I was solely focused on how happy I was and I wasn't thinking. I am a terrible person. I need serious help. I am a narcissist," and so on. I was in no mood to hear it. My anger was overwhelming. Above all else, I was genuinely furious that he could not simply be honest, that he was trying to reconcile with her. I did not speak to him again until the following week, seeking closure. In summary, he explained that that night I had chosen to give him space after our awkward conversation. He and Tish engaged in an in-depth discussion and concluded that I was nothing to worry about. I remained silent while he shared, but I made it clear that if that was his stance, he should have been upfront about it and never allowed me to come visit. He asserted that everything shifted after I left, insisting, "I wasn't trying to use you and I didn't use you, I just made a choice." With that, I wished him well and have not spoken to him since. I see no purpose in continuing communication. His friends reached out, expressing their regret over what had transpired, indicating that they still wanted to remain friends. I bear no ill will toward them. To be honest, they divulged that Ryan had not been the best friend to them. It seemed one of them kept company with him solely because her partner did as well. Regardless, they mentioned that judging by the chemistry between Ryan and me during my visit, they felt that Ryan desired to be with me, but then Tish returned after discovering my presence. They even expressed that Tish had a pattern of this sort of behavior, wanting to leave and experience freedom while keeping Ryan available for her return once she was ready. Ultimately, the way things ended has left me genuinely repulsed by Ryan, and I no longer trust anything he says. It pains me to admit that I still love him. Like I told him, love, no matter how toxic, does not easily switch off and takes time to overcome. I genuinely wish I could move on more rapidly, as I often find myself pondering what I did to deserve being told one thing only to discover it was a lie. Even if he didn't wish to be with me, I would comprehend that I did comprehend that. What angered me was his abrupt transition to claiming things he clearly did not mean. I only wish I hadn't squandered my time on someone who could not reciprocate genuine friendship. It all felt like one colossal deception. In any case, that is my story. To summarize, I merely sought a solid friendship and the enjoyment of our moments together, but he wanted someone to fill a void. Am I overreacting? Story 2. I've been in this relationship for 4 years, living together and struggling, but she keeps ignoring my disabilities and controlling everything. She even limits time with friends. Warning, this may be a lengthy thread for some readers. I have been in a romantic relationship with my life partner for approximately 4 years now. However, our relationship is quite unique. When we initially met, I was experiencing some of the most challenging times in my life, frequently in and out of the hospital due to mental health issues, while she was completing her college education. She had never had a romantic relationship or experienced intimacy with anyone else before me. I never formally proposed that we become a couple because I was raised with a perspective that opposes traditional relationships, and I have never adhered to the conventional norms surrounding love and sex. Additionally, I identify as non-monogamous. I communicated all of this to her clearly before, during, and especially after we became closer and began to engage intimately. Even though I was apprehensive about entering a relationship again when we first met, I decided to take a chance and develop our connection. We both found ourselves in precarious and stressful circumstances, which led to us cohabiting after being acquainted for just 1 year, as we lost our housing around the same time. After she graduated, we finally moved to the city. We have been in our apartment for 2 years now, yet it has been quite challenging. We had our first argument on the very first night due to her persistent negative comments about our upstairs neighbors, though we had just been involved in a car accident earlier that day, and it was particularly noisy, especially since it was Thanksgiving night. The additional negativity was draining. I had hoped that moving would improve our situation, but it remains difficult. She dislikes my cat, claiming her noises are bothersome, which saddens me since I used to enjoy interacting with my cat frequently before we began living together. My partner often chases the cat away, pretending to kick her when she runs around, meows, or begs for food, which I have never considered problematic as it is typical animal behavior. My cat has had anxiety issues in the past from living with my abusive stepfather, yet my partner finds this behavior irritating, so she often confines my cat to her room. Our decorating styles are quite different, which has regrettably resulted in me being unable to display any of my belongings in shared spaces. We have separate rooms due to differing sleep habits. It is overwhelming having a room filled with all my possessions, but that has been my reality since I transitioned out of the foster care system. My partner prefers everything to be neat and adheres to a more socially acceptable aesthetic, which creates friction between us. I continue to struggle with mental health challenges, but I have made significant improvements. My income is limited due to my disabilities, and I recently lost access to Medicaid and food assistance, leading to constant hunger and fatigue. Additionally, I have been unmedicated, which presents its own set of challenges. Despite these struggles, I have always been independent and responsible for my own needs without being overly burdensome to my loved ones. My partner is not comfortable sharing her possessions either, so she often withholds items until I am in urgent need, such as when I have gone a few days without food or need assistance purchasing cat litter. I cannot drive due to my disabilities, so she helps me with transportation occasionally, but she is not fond of driving in general, even though I have offered to contribute to gas and car maintenance. I have been transparent about my limitations and the need for assistance while I heal from the trauma I have endured over the years, including incidents from 2 years ago that my partner witnessed but did not perceive as particularly traumatic. Despite this, my partner seems to forget my disabilities at times. Recently, she has expressed difficulty understanding how someone can live with my challenges since her life experiences differ significantly. We have a couples therapy session scheduled for next week, and it will be with her therapist, who has been part of her life since childhood. My biggest concern is that they might conclude that I am the root of the problem and label me as lazy since my partner frequently expresses dissatisfaction with my level of independence regarding household chores. I acknowledge that I have difficulties completing daily chores without reminders, yet I have improved considerably. I can now finish my chores in 3 to 4 days instead of taking more than a week. Most notably, I can complete them within 1 to 2 days, which I believe is quite impressive given my daily struggles. However, to her, this is not commendable as she expects everything to be cleaned daily. Due to memory issues and clinical depression, anxiety, and fatigue, it takes me longer to accomplish tasks. I continue to explore strategies to manage this, like setting reminders and ensuring I eat for the energy I need, despite also dealing with an eating disorder, which she claims she cannot comprehend. I genuinely strive to follow her preferences while also trying not to be hard on myself regarding my healing process and responsibilities, particularly caring for my cat so she does not have to. I understand the stress of caring for someone else, as I raised my siblings before having to leave school. I feel that she takes on the role of caregiver by reminding me to tend to my needs and that of my cat. I struggle with financial management, so she handles those tasks as well. She also secured my last 2 jobs and is a significant support in my life. However, I am not permitted to go out at night as she does not wish to be disturbed by noise after 10:20 p.m. She also becomes envious and questioning when I want to spend time with friends or have sleepovers. I have always enjoyed platonic closeness with my friends and family, but she feels that is abnormal and that it makes her insecure when I cuddle with friends, even though we share the same social circle. At times, I feel down about myself and may skip a shower or forget to tend to the litter box, but never for more than 3 days. Instead of showing compassion, she closes my door and tells me that my cat and I smell, which only makes me want to retreat to my room more. When she is not being critical or unkind, she can be humorous, kind, and playful. She claims I do not contribute enough around the house and expresses frustration about having to instruct me on what needs to be done rather than me anticipating her needs. However, I genuinely do not know what she wants unless we have a conversation about it, particularly since she has never had a romantic relationship before, and I want to understand her desires and expectations from a partner. I also identify as intersex, possessing both male and female characteristics, though I predominantly appear female. She has made comments implying that I am not masculine enough, which makes me uncomfortable because I have always identified more closely with being male. I was simply born differently, and I believe I embody many qualities of a gentleman, as my mother raised me well. I have even studied how to be a gentleman because I aspire to be a good partner in the future, which remains my goal. But my recovery process is taking time due to traumatic setbacks. I think my partner may not fully comprehend the situation she has entered and might be weary of living with someone who is not as functional or independent as she is and who does not maintain the same level of cleanliness or punctuality. I used to uphold those standards before my accidents, but I am still in the healing phase. I am uncertain how to proceed within our relationship. It is clear that we both love one another, but I question whether we were ready for a commitment when we first began dating, and if we still are. She has mentioned multiple times that she only recently started feeling like we are a couple, which is disheartening because I believed we began our relationship approximately 4 years ago, shortly after we met. According to her perspective, we have only been together for less than 2 years. This leaves me wondering about the significance of the love, intimacy, and challenges we have shared. Despite our long history of supporting each other, she seems to assess her relationships through a modern societal lens, which I suppose means that because I never formally asked her to date, she did not perceive us as being together. I am also anxious about the prospect of having to move because I am not currently in a position to do so. If we were to split, I hope she would be the one to relocate and not force me out, as she has attempted to do before when I became overwhelmed during disagreements and raised my voice, which is something I am actively working on controlling. Moreover, she frequently sends me hurtful messages throughout the day and night, expressing complaints about various things I have or have not done, only to return home and act as though those messages were benign, then ask me if something is wrong and attempt to comfort me because I seem down, having spent the day reading her negative texts without wanting to escalate into an argument. As I mentioned, she has a sweet side, but she is also quite close-minded regarding mental health and compromise. Given all this context, I am unsure about my options in this situation. What if her therapist determines that I am in the wrong and I am left to accept that I need to overcome my disabilities? How does one coexist with someone who believes they are always right, whose perspective is the only valid one, and who does not listen when confronted with serious conversations about these issues? Story 3. I called the police on my dad after he choked my stepmom. His reaction, blaming me for ruining his life. WTF. Father, 34-36 years old, male. Me, 11-14 years old, female. Stepmother, 35-37 years old, female. And mother, 34-36 years old, female. My father and I have experienced numerous conflicts throughout our lives. When a resolute father meets a headstrong child from a divorced family, clashes are inevitable. I hold immense admiration for my family, but my respect is contingent upon the respect. I am not suggesting that I wish to be regarded as an adult. That would be ridiculous. Rather, I simply wish to be treated with dignity and not as though I am foolish. Having divorced parents allows one to witness two contrasting perspectives on the same situation. One parent might express one opinion, while the other counters with something entirely different. As the child in this scenario, I find myself having to navigate whom to trust. At the start of 6th grade, I moved in with my father after my mother, who possesses full custody, invited me to. She was encountering difficulties with my stepfather and believed it would be beneficial for me to reside in a more stable environment. Additionally, my biological father is financially better off than my biological mother. I agreed because, as a child, the prospect of spending more time with my father was highly appealing. I care for both of my parents, but since my biological father does not have full custody, it is evident that I spend less time with him overall. Therefore, taking a year to live with my dad and visiting my mother every other weekend seemed like a fantastic arrangement. During that time, everything was going well. I was a straight-A student and well-groomed. I was labeled as that rich kid, the one who arrived in shiny, colorful Range Rovers and luxury Benz cars worth over $120,000. However, while my dad presented me as a spoiled child on his social media, the reality was that I was often the girl who stayed in her room all day, cuddling with my dogs. If I made any mistakes in math, he would call me dyslexic since I had always struggled with the subject. Each day, he'd remind me that certain things didn't make sense to me. If I voiced anything he disdained, he would threaten to revoke my privileges of staying in my room, something I enjoyed. He frequently threatened to take away normal things like my television, chances to meet with friends, and even my door, which didn't bother me too much as I understood. I was even punished if I cleaned in a manner he found unsatisfactory. As his responsibility, I was tasked with cleaning up the piles of dog waste in our backyard since they were too lazy to handle it themselves. Whenever I would leave for my mother's house, they would allow the dog mess to accumulate until my return. I have never been particularly religious, as many faiths have numerous inconsistencies. So I tend to go with the flow. During middle school, I had many friends from the LGBTQ community, which my father condemned, claiming they were destined for hell, and insisted that I would too if I resembled them. He forced me to watch demon exorcisms on YouTube to back up his claim that anyone who identified as gay or transgender would end up in a similar predicament. There were moments when he would attempt to compel me to join him at church, when all I wished to do was stay home with the dogs and scroll on my phone. I admit this was immature behavior. However, during those times, he often blamed my demeanor on my mother and her family. He would disparage her for her lower financial standing compared to him and criticize my grandmother for her past. He would go on about how he bought my younger brother's sports equipment from the child support he provided for me. He would insinuate that my mother was unclean and casually reference how my stepfather was merely any Mexican, despite the fact that my stepfather is actually Guatemalan. I had reached my breaking point, prompting my departure. I returned eventually, but I no longer stayed with him. I am now 12 years old. During the summer I left, he frequently inundated me with texts asking, "Is this how you wish our relationship to be?" He would send screenshots of messages from my mother. I confided in her about his behavior and statements, leading her to be understandably upset. But that was all in the past, right? About a month into returning to my father's home, he made it feel as though repairing our relationship was solely my responsibility, as though I had committed some wrongdoing. I genuinely felt as if I were in the wrong, and it seemed like we were no longer familiar with each other. One day I was home alone when he returned from an outing with my stepmother. She was not with him, having taken her own vehicle. After several hours, he came inside, still alone, exclaiming things like, "She can just flush her ring down the toilet," and "I don't want to be married to liars," which is quite hypocritical. A couple of hours later, my stepmother returned, visibly intoxicated and causing chaos, throwing furniture and banging on the walls. She left but returned the next morning and continued her erratic behavior, still under the influence. My father, who usually kept his calm composure, had his hands behind his back, enduring the situation. I respected him until he too lost his temper and went into a violent rage, destroying items around the house: air fryers, portraits, microwaves, and nearly throwing his work computer. My stepmother came to me looking for assistance, as if I could help. I ended up stepping on broken glass and called my mother. This marked the second time I escaped from his house for an extended duration. Then I returned again, just turned 13. Initially, everything seemed fine. The start can often be turbulent, but we managed to navigate it. He acquired a new residence, about 2.5 stories tall. While he occasionally acted unpleasant, I was barred from using their bathroom shower. Since my shower was broken, the only one accessible was located in the basement. My door was also damaged, not closing correctly. He used my room for some of his clothes and didn't even know my bra size. When I requested a specific style of clothing, he would purposefully buy the complete opposite, and when I expressed my dislike for it, he would label me as spoiled and regale me with tales of, "When I was your age." He would then post about me on social media as if I was a story time about a spoiled child. One day, we were enjoying ourselves, playing on the PlayStation 5. Just as he was about to purchase the new Mortal Kombat game, my stepmother confronted him about allegations of him embezzling money from the 4-5 preschools they managed. This struck me as odd because he didn't need to resort to theft. He could simply announce, "Hey, I'm taking this." Concerned, she probed further. He retorted that it was none of her concern, insisting she learn her place. His anger escalated, leading her to leave. He then followed her into their room and into their walk-in closet. I retreated to the bathroom, which offered a direct view of their bedroom when the door was open, as I would typically sit there during their arguments. This situation felt unsettling because he rarely prolonged disputes to this extent. I texted my mother for the address of my father's house, driven by an instinct that something was amiss. Before long, I heard him threatening to physically harm my stepmother during their argument, right before he began choking her. I panicked and burst into the room, shouting, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I cursed without even realizing it, and they seemed oblivious. He released her neck, and I hurried away from him, shocked that he would act so erratically in front of his child as if nothing were wrong. He grabbed her purse because in their typical arguments, she would often leave for her parents' house for the night. Without her purse, She lacked the keys to her car and was trapped at home. He called me over to the dining table for a discussion, where he compared my stepmother to our dogs while reprimanding them. He claimed his abuse of her was discipline. He drew parallels to how my mother managed my brothers, implying that choking his wife was akin to simply saying no to a child or pet. When he asked what I would do in such a situation, I stated that I would call the police. He dismissed my response, guilt-tripping me by claiming that contacting law enforcement would ruin not only his life but my stepmother's, and that of the families who relied on his preschools. I inquired if he would repeat his actions, to which he replied, "Yeah, if stepmother's name made me mad again." That marked the end of our conversation. I retreated to the basement, claiming I needed to use the restroom, but I really called the police. I confided in them regarding everything that was happening. My mother decided against letting me testify, so he was released after one day. This was the third time I left. I returned again, only to discover that my stepmother was pregnant. Within 3 hours of being back at his house the following day, he initiated a conversation by asserting that I was in the wrong. He insisted that children should not call the police without an adult's guidance, declaring that no one was on my side. He accused me of merely wanting to hurt him and went to the lengths of pretended to cry before suddenly shifting to anger, as if his tears were some magical substance. Keep in mind that this man manages over 4 preschools while teaching adult parenting classes, yet he is abusive toward his wife. His name is Bendria Andrews. You can search for him online or on social media, just don't place your children in his schools or youth programs. Am I the asshole? Story 4. I found my boyfriend's Reddit where he posted mean things about me for months. He said I'm abusive and hoped I'd read it. WTF. I recently discovered my boyfriend's Reddit account, and he has been posting negative comments about me for a considerable period of time. I am uncertain about how to proceed or what steps to take next. I am honestly at a loss regarding how to address this situation. I would like to provide some context about our relationship before delving into the main issue. Apologies for the lengthy explanation. Background: my boyfriend and I have been in a relationship for almost 3 years. During our first year, we lived in the same location, but for nearly the past 2 years, we have been maintaining a long-distance relationship with the intention of living together as soon as possible. Although our relationship has not always been perfect, it has generally been positive. We met while pursuing our graduate studies, share the same professional interests, discuss future plans including marriage and cohabitation, encourage each other's ambitions, and have compatible hobbies. Overall, we get along quite well. When our relationship began, I felt a deep connection, believing he was the right person for me. However, early in our relationship, I struggled significantly with feelings of jealousy. This has been an ongoing challenge for me, which I actively address in therapy, but at times it can be overwhelming. I make an effort not to let my jealousy impact our relationship, yet there are occasions when I feel compelled to discuss my emotions with him, and sometimes it doesn't help. Around the 8 to 9 month mark in our relationship, my jealousy intensified, partly due to being on the wrong medication, an extensive story for another time. The medication I was taking caused me to experience weight loss and hallucinations, leading me to believe he had been at my home when he had not. This situation remains puzzling for me. Because I believed I saw him leave from my roommate's area, I concluded he must have been unfaithful. He insists that was not the case, leaving me unsure of what truly occurred. To add context, during this time, I was dangerously underweight, weighing about 90 pounds, and taking a high dosage of that medication, which can induce psychotic symptoms. Despite these difficulties, my boyfriend supported me, recognizing that I was experiencing a mental health crisis. However, I realize it hurt him deeply to feel I did not trust him. While I have made significant progress in managing these feelings, I still experience jealousy at times. I sense that he is becoming increasingly strained in his ability to support me. I am aware that my jealousy affects him, and I do not want to feel this way. I take responsibility for my role in this ongoing issue, but aside from this, we have not encountered many serious problems in our relationship, and he understands that I am making an effort to improve. As my jealous feelings have persisted, my boyfriend has become less willing to be supportive. In the early stages of our relationship, particularly during that challenging mental health period I mentioned. He was incredibly understanding. However, as time has passed, he has become defensive and angry, resulting in arguments whenever I raise these kinds of topics. He often questions why I do not trust him after 2.5 years. Our arguments have escalated significantly over the past 8 months, with him making threats to end our relationship, using hurtful language, and behaving unkindly during conflicts. He claims that I push him into a corner with my jealousy, justifying his hurtful remarks by saying that they stem from feeling deeply wounded. I recall one particularly nasty argument in early December that bordered on verbal abuse. Many would have called it quits then, but my feelings for him are strong, and I hoped we could improve. For a time, things seemed to be on the upswing. We spent 3 weeks together over the holidays and had a mostly enjoyable experience with only one minor argument. When we parted ways, I felt optimistic about our relationship, believing we were making progress. However, current issue approximately 2 weeks ago, I unexpectedly discovered his Reddit account. He had mentioned earlier that he had commented on a post, and when I saw it in my feed the next day, I went to upvote his comment, thinking it was amusing. Out of curiosity, I explored his account further to see what else he had been commenting on or posting. While there are many troubling aspects to this discovery, he was not posting on other women's posts or making offensive comments. However, mixed in with his normal interactions about video games and technology were numerous posts about me. In those posts, he expressed how terrible he thinks I am. He labeled me as abusive, mentioned attempts to break up with me, asserted that men should always be prepared to be single as relationships frequently fail, claimed that I gaslight him, and accused me of changing the narrative in our arguments. In one post, he even wrote, "I hope she's reading this," which I inadvertently did. The more I investigated, the more I found a substantial number of negative comments about me stretching back almost a year. I quickly texted him, saying we needed to have a conversation. In hindsight, I probably should have waited, but less than 30 minutes later, he called me from work, requesting an explanation. Despite my instinct to wait, I told him what I had discovered. I had taken several screenshots prior, although I had yet to explore the entire account. He instantly understood and began offering apologies. He accepted responsibility, conveyed his love for me, expressed his desire for me to stay, and activated his location, sharing in hopes of alleviating my jealousy. He also stated that I could check his phone anytime, an empty gesture given the distance between us. I suppose those actions were intended to compensate for what transpired, but I do not see how they really address the core issue. In the course of our conversation, he deleted his Reddit account, which leads me to believe there may have been more content he wanted to hide from me. I will never know the full extent of what he posted. The moment I inquired about the deletion, he confirmed it. I pointed out that it seemed rather problematic, and he stated that he tends to eliminate negative aspects from his life at once, but I am unsure if that is genuine. On another occasion, he claimed he deleted it to prevent me from fixating on the issue. So, which explanation should I believe? His justification for the posts was that he only wrote them after we had an argument and needed an outlet. He chose Reddit as his venting ground instead of confiding in friends to avoid altering their perceptions of me. He does not attend therapy, so this was his method of expression. He asserted that everything he wrote was also spoken to me directly, which is accurate. However, that truth does not ameliorate the situation. In fact, it arguably exacerbates it. One hopes that in the heat of an argument, unkind words are not truly reflective of one's beliefs, but to see them validated in his posts is disheartening. He vowed to start therapy after this incident and has attended 1 session so far. Although I want to remain with him, I am struggling to regain a sense of normalcy. My feelings of hurt overshadow everything, and I sense that he has not made sufficient efforts to atone. I feel that he needs to demonstrate to me that those hurtful comments he made behind the anonymity of the internet do not represent his true feelings. He continually asks me what would be necessary for him to achieve that understanding, yet I find myself unable to articulate an answer. It is his unfiltered voice, and he assumed no one would discover it is him. Why should I not believe that reflects his true feelings? Yet, I also understand the need for everyone to vent their emotions. I love him, And I know he loves me, but I am profoundly hurt. I am unsure about how to navigate this situation or how to heal. At the same time, I feel an underlying sense of guilt, thinking that my jealousy may have prompted him to share those feelings online. I would appreciate hearing your thoughts and advice on how to approach this situation. Thank you for taking the time to read this.